Welcome to the Buddy and Kreese Show. I am your host, Kreese. Our friend Buddy is not joining us today. He is out, not feeling real well, so we wish him a speedy recovery. I'm hoping to get him back on the mic with me for our second upload on Wednesdays. So it's good to have all of you here. So you guys are all stuck with me for today, so let's get rolling. You know, it's been a few years. I was working at a mental health facility. Working campus safety and security, working the graveyard shift, which I prefer. One, the residents are all sleeping, so you had little interaction there. Two, most of the staff that's working graveyards was plain simple. It wasn't a full complement of administrators and whatnot. And, in that type of position, I prefer graveyards. Less people I have to deal with. I can just work, get my hours in, and go home. Well, this evening, I was assigned to what we call roaming patrols, where we were on a 25-acre property where, being the mental health facility, it had its own, unfortunately, cemetery over the years that was established decades prior for patients that passed that had no family members willing to take their bodies, and the bodies could be signed over to. We also had several condemned buildings. Within the last 2 years, the staff and the residents of the facility, they all moved over to brand new facilities, multi-million-dollar facilities. They were 3-4 floors, very large floors. Facility had training areas. It had a separate building for cafeteria. It had counseling sessions areas that were separate, and it had 3 main towers that we call them, with multiple floors. Now, the third floor of these buildings were not occupied at all. They were still what you consider based pretty much under construction until enough residents were admitted into the facility that they'd have to open those locations. And then we had two major facilities that were condemned. They'd been in place and been utilized since the late 1800s for clients that were coming in that were needing to have the services, those that were court-ordered civilly, criminally, but they couldn't stand trial due to their mental health statuses, so they were, pretty much permanent residents there. So these buildings were in bad shape. When they moved out, honestly, they should have been condemned decades prior. I mean, decades prior to being allowed people in there. I mean, it really was an injustice that they allowed people to live in those facilities and receive treatment in such poor, terrible conditions that they were in. Now that it's a fabulous facility, it's brand new, everything works great, it's up to date. But at the time, these buildings, it had been 2 years since they moved everybody over, and so they were condemned. But part of our duties as the roaming officer, we had a F150 Ford pickup truck, early 90s, that we would patrol the property with. And we'd do our rounds, and one of our rounds was just to go into these buildings, check all the outer doors, go into them, make sure nobody had gotten into them, because they are condemned. And we're on a 25-acre property. To the south of us was business areas, a major thoroughfare, people of the night, as I call them, would walk up and down the streets there for business. Illicit businesses, you can guess what that was. To the east, we had neighborhoods. To the east and northeast, we had neighborhoods there. And we had a back gate that was locked, but from time to time, an intoxicated person would drive through that fence and through that gate. And so we had to make sure that gate always stayed secured, just due to our residents that were staying there. Because it'd be a danger to the community, it'd be a danger to the residents themselves if they were able to get out of the facility without supervision. So one night I was patrolling, and it was my turn to go ahead and check to check one of the 2 condemned buildings. As I pulled up, this building is 2 stories, 3 wings, 2 stories, all attached. It pretty much, I called the building, it made a T. It looked like it made a T. So one area we always go in, we had a couple options. We had 3 locations where we could enter the building. You had the east side, which was a doorway right into the hallway, stairwell that led you to the floors. You had the loading dock area on the far west side, where supplies used to be backed in, trucked in, and unloaded, and it was a regular loading dock. I call that the warehouse entrance. And then you had the main front walkway entrance into the facility. On any given night, you can go whichever way you want. Me personally, I prefer going through the warehouse. One, I could park the truck where it's not visible, so if there is somebody watching that had broken in, there's no windows on that side of the building, so I could park the truck there, go into the through the warehouse doors, through the storage area, through the docks, and nobody would know that I make it in there. So prior to this, I was notified and I'd only been there a couple weeks when I was finally allowed to go on a roving patrol. The staff, they were the graveyard shift was good people that I worked with. They were like-minded like myself, that they've experienced things in a variety of different positions and jobs that they've had over the years and in their personal lives. And working at this location, this mental health facility, mental health, for those of you that don't know, mental health individuals often see things, hear things. A lot of times people in the doctors say, well, that's just, your mental health there. But I always took it for what they're telling me is what they're actually experiencing, because they have the abilities that, due to their mental illness, that their senses are aware, they're open, they can definitely see a lot more things going on in the world. So I always took it with a grain of salt, of course, but I never discounted anything that anybody said, whether they were patients, staff, visitors. Always took that in consideration with the stories and experiences they were having. So as I go on here, the staff, they notify me and said, hey, be aware when you go in these buildings, we've had some experiences. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, what? Tell me, so I can be aware. Well, they said that there's a lot of movement, a lot of running around, and they said it's not rodents, it's not pigeons inside the condemned building that I was going into that evening, the 2-story one. They informed me that they've seen a lot of shadow people running around in there. But they also informed me that from time to time, they do have homeless people that are able to break into that, whether a door wasn't closed all the way or they jimmied the lock and they were able to get in there. That they have caught homeless people every now and then that do wander into that building, and they catch them in there. So not very often, but it does happen. So to be aware of all those things. So my first night, again, when I was on patrol, I was headed in there, and one of the other officers, she was going on her break and said, hey, are you going over to the other building? I go, yeah. Have you been by there yet? She goes, no. She goes, I want to go back over there, because that last time, and she'd worked in patrol 2 nights before, and she said the last time she went over there, she had an experience and she wants to go in and do some testing with me and check it out and double see, since I was going to be there with her. I'm like, yeah, sure, come on. So she was on break, no big deal. She jumped in the truck with me, drove around 25 acres to the other side of the property, and we went ahead and entered the building. And she informed me that she had somebody following her in that building 2 nights prior, that she had a lot of conversations happening inside that facility, and there was nobody in this building. This building, again, is condemned. And we would radio in our locations when we were going in buildings, who was there, etc. Now, every now and then, the supervisor he'd be out patrolling around and would come check the location where everybody was. And if he knew we were on patrol, he'd get out and he'd go in there and double check, which was fine. But we always knew when the supervisor was around. Very rarely was it that he was able to sneak up on anybody, because again, he wasn't trying to hide it, and it is what it is, right? So we go in and we clear the second floor. Go upstairs. We always went upstairs first, clear the second floor, because if anybody's in there, we're going to flush them down one of 3 stairwells with us checking the rooms and the floors. So we go upstairs, clear. It's pretty quiet. Yeah, she goes, the energy's it's real mild in here. Usually it feels real thick and kind of eerie, and the hairs on the back of your neck and your arms would stand up. And she goes, not tonight. She goes, second floor seems very, very clear. And I'm like, well, that's good. At this point, I'm not having no experiences. I'm not thinking of anything. No experiences in this facility. So we clear the top floor, go through, look at how they had things set up, talk about, I'd do things differently if I had this facility, so forth and so on, just chit-chatting. And she goes, okay. She goes, you ready to go down this stairwell? I go, yeah. I go, why? Is there something? And she goes, one, it's dark. There's no lights. Two, she also said that they'll have sometimes a shadow person, for lack of a better description, waiting at the bottom of the stairs. And as soon as they enter the hallway or the stairwell, the top door floor shuts. Then they see the light from the bottom open up, and they can hear it go running down the hallway. And I go, well, that one's interesting, because most shadow people that I've run into in the past, they just kind of go through walls and doors, and they don't just open it. So I'm like, you sure it's not homeless? She goes, man, we have looked and we've looked and we've looked. She goes, we've had people at every door entrance, and we had people inside, and that still happened, and we had no explanation. We never found anybody. I go, well, okay, well, that's interesting. So I go, well, maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe we'll have that experience. She goes, yeah, maybe we will. We'll see. So we go downstairs, and I'll be honest with you at this time. I'm the new guy, so I'm totally waiting for them to jump out, try to scare me, mess with me, the whole 9 yards. We go downstairs. Nothing opens the door. She goes, wow. She goes, that's odd. She goes, this is one of the very first times that's never happened. I go, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm waiting. I'm like, all right, my guard's up. I'm waiting for them to jump at me, because if they jump out at me, I'm going to jump back at them and try to scare them at their own game. So we go downstairs, and we clear the one hallway, clear the second hallway, we get to the third hallway. Because remember, this building's shaped like a T. So we get to the ground floor, you have patient rooms and exams and doctors and day rooms and a nursing station in the one hallway. The second hallway is all administrative staff and leads to the front door, what was traditionally the front door of the facility for guests and visitors and staff to go through. And then the third hallway was what I used to call the medical wing, or maybe the health wing is probably a better way of explaining it. There was patient assistant showers and tubs. They had this big bathtub that had an arm for those patients that were in wheelchairs. It had a big mechanical arm that they could manually use to lift them up out of their wheelchairs and put them into the bathtub. You had exam rooms. This really was more of a health, fitness. I mean, we even had a couple of treadmills down there at the end of the hallway. Health, fitness, medical wing of the entire facility. It really was. That's where they get their not their mental health stuff, but their physical wellness. Physicals, if they're sick, that's where they would go. If they had the flu or something, get their medicines, get checked out, things of that nature. Get their blood pressure and their heart rates checked. So we go down to the end of the hallway, and she goes, all right. She goes, you stay here, I'm going to walk down the hallway. And I said, okay. Didn't think anything of it. I thought I was waiting for him to jump out. And she gets down there. She gets halfway, and she stops and turns and looks into the room where this bathtub with this manual handicap arm to assist those patients into the bathtub. And she's looking at me, and she turns pale white. And she motions that she hears and is seeing things move around in that room. And I go, okay. So I motioned that I was going to come down there. She said, no, hold off, wait. So I'm already thinking they're in there, and they're going to scare me as soon as I go down there. So she goes the rest down the hallway and double checks that door, and she's lickety split. She is not taking her time. She is hauling butt now. Gets down the rest of that hallway, checks all the rooms, checks that outer door, makes sure it's locked. Comes back, slowly starts to go by that room, and stops and stares back in there. And this time she motions for me to come down. So I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. So I go down there, and I stop right before I get to that door. She's also on the other side of the door, and she motions, just listen. So we're quiet. And when we do these building checks, we turn our radios off or really, really low to make sure we can hear everything going in there, and plus not to give away our positions as we're doing our security checks. Just due to the neighborhood that we were in, due to the fact that we've had trespassers in the past, and especially this building, and that we don't really want the patients to hear our radio traffic either, because this was long before you had the earpieces that you could plug in the radios where only you would hear it and the public wouldn't hear it, and this is before we had the microphones that we could put on our shoulders to talk to, the little extended microphones that off the radio with the cord, and then we could put it to the lapel of our shirts on our shoulders. That was long before that. This was a regular walkie-talkie. So she mentions, and she motions, just listen. And sure enough, you had conversation going on in there. Now, it was very faint, but it was clear, if that makes any sense to everybody. It was hard to make out what they were saying. I would almost say it was like not a doctor-patient conversation, but like patient with patient type of conversation. You really couldn't make out specifically what they were saying, but it was more of a laid-back, relaxed kind of conversation. You could hear it. You could just hear it, when somebody's whispering, you can't make out what they're saying, but they're talking. That's really what it was sounding like. So I look over the other officer, and she's like turning 5 shades of white at this point. But then you have a shadow. There was a window, and like the bathroom windows that sit right on top that are pretty skinny little ones. They had those windows across the entire top of the room, along the north wall. So you couldn't really see out unless you jumped up or stood on something. But it let in plenty of light from the street lamps outside in the parking lot. Those lights would be blocked. It'd go black and it'd be blocked, like if somebody walked in front of it. And we're now looking in there, and we just see a faint shadow walk back and forth across there. So we're like, okay, so we've got some activity. We have something going on here now. So this other officer goes, "You want to do a test?" And I go, "Yeah, go ahead and do a test. See if it'll answer you." So she answers. She goes, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. This is Kreese. We're not here to hurt you. We're just doing our jobs, doing our walkthrough. Would you like to communicate with us?" And we just hear a pop. Now the pop was, I say a pop, it was more of like a flick or a ding off this fiberglass standalone handicap bathtub. It was like somebody either hit it with something or they flicked with their hand enough to make it go pop. And I call it a pop. It sounded like a pop to me. And so we look at it, it's like, that's interesting. So the other officer asks 2 more times, we need to verify that we're talking to you and you understand us. Ask to do the same thing, and then just on cue, it would do it. It would hit. It would bounce off of it. Just on cue. All 3 times. So at this point, we're like, okay, I tell the other officer, I said, ask if it wants us to leave. Have it make a specific sound or hit a specific piece of equipment in there. So there was this metal. Now, when they condemned the buildings, the staff left all kinds of stuff, typical waste of organizations, because they're going to buy new because they got these new buildings. So they left, there was a metal aluminum cart on wheels, real light, to move around supplies and stuff for the doctors. Kind of similar to what you see at a dentist's office. Little trays at the dentist's office, but this is more of like a cart with a couple shelves on it. But it had wheels. So this other officer said, if you want us to leave, tap that metal cart so we know that you're telling us yes to leave. If you want us to stay, do nothing. Make no sound. So the officer asked that, and we're standing in the hallway but looking into the room, and that metal tap, ting, and we could tell that it was off of that metal cart. So we looked at each other like, So then I tell her, ask it twice more so we can verify that it wants us to leave to do the same thing. And sure enough, the officer asked again, ding, 3rd time, ding. And so at that point we said, okay, thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to be here this evening and communicating with us. We are going to leave the building. And at that point, very fascinating from my standpoint, like, wow, they're telling the truth. The staff's telling the truth. They are having experiences here. And it wasn't that I doubted them, but I hadn't seen it or I hadn't had any evidence yet. And that's what I go by, is the evidence. I look at the evidence, and that's how I make my determinations. So as we started exiting. So at this point, we're honestly kind of giddy. Little schoolgirls, kind of, oh wow, couldn't wait to talk about it till we got outside. So we went through, resecured all the doors behind us leading through the warehouse into the dock. We get outside, and the other officer starts to say something about the incident. I say, no, not yet. Don't wait till we're in the vehicle to talk about it. And the reason I do that is because energies, spirits, things that they can travel, they can hear, and we don't know what other experiences we may be having in this building or will have in this building. So I wanted to make sure that we weren't tainting anything with our conversation outside. I waited until we got in the truck and then down the little street on the property a little ways before, as we were headed back to the next building, just to make sure that it was square. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No contamination. With the paranormal, we're good to go. So we get in the vehicle, and she's like, yeah, she goes, that's what we're experiencing. She goes, that one was the first time that it actually answered and was answering questions. And I go, that's really interesting. So that was one of the first experiences I had working at that facility. I've had many other experiences, from shadow people to full-blown apparitions in the windows, moving curtains, watching them move curtains. Patients reporting to us that they saw somebody, they were out on the break during the day or even the evening, because I always had an evening break before bedtime, where they're allowed to go out in the courtyard of each of the towers of the new building. This is the new buildings, and that they would report seeing people up on the third floor, which were not in use. And the only ones that had access to that facility and should be up there checking the doors to make sure they're locked and no patients are up there was the campus safety and security specialist. Otherwise, doctors, nurses, janitorial staff refused to go up there. So, there's a bunch of, again, mental health facilities are always rampant with paranormal activity, just because of what they're dealing with and the energies that are out there, and just what, mental health really expands somebody's experience and abilities. It really does. So never, here's my PSA for the day, ladies and gentlemen. Never underestimate somebody with mental health telling you that they see certain things. It could be just in their minds. They could be truly having a mental health issue, or they may actually be witnessing something or experiencing something. So you just never know. So yeah, things are out of this world. You never know what you're going to expect, what you're going to have these experiences and whatnot. So I always say, keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, listen, see, your smells too. You never know. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this evening. This is your host, Kreese. Get well to Buddy. I'd like to give a shout out to Reed. Thanks for listening. Make sure you listen to this episode too. And everybody have a great night. Remember, we'll have another upload this Wednesday. And this has been a Loyal Family Productions and Entertainment joint.